questions did they ask you during the OCI?
So, and here's something that I can, maybe also talk a bit about networking here and how that figures into it. The first question I think anyone asked me was, tell me about yourself. That's the first question that they put in front of you. And if you start thinking about it, it is a loaded question, especially if you only have 17 minutes, because you have to give them room to ask you more questions and learn more about you. So this answer cannot go on for very long, and that makes it harder. You have to time it, you have to sort of trim it, make it concise and everything. So I think one of the things that helped me was networking, that I had done prior to OCIs and everything. It was so on that, that networking was completely aimless because I was told just network, and that is what I did. I met a bunch of people, bunch of lawyers, in the hope that maybe this is the way to land a job in Canada, or this is the way to make inroads into these big firms. Whoever I met, the first question that they asked me was, tell me about yourself. So I had, you could say, hundreds of interviews prior to this asking me the same question. So by that time, I had sort of fine-tuned it. And I had also learned how people downtown speak or talk, because it was a departure from how people network in my country as to how people network in this country. So I think networking in that sense, which is what I realized during my interns or during the OCIs, was that it was grounds for me to prepare for my interviews and to speak with all these people. So for anyone who's looking to apply for the OCIs and prepare for the interviews eventually, I think you should start networking. It will help you a lot. And yeah, so just as I mentioned, it was mostly another common question was, what made you apply to this firm? But it wasn't asked, in such a straightforward way all the time. It was mostly, sometimes they'll just, disguise it as, we do this, we do that. What makes you interested in this, or something like that. Or they would probably look at your resume and try to map your experience with what they do and ask how your experience or your interest would translate into our firm, something of that sort, I guess, a bit of variation. And they, then they also gave you room to ask questions, towards the end. That is also when you have to be prepared to, ask them good questions and make an impression. For that, what I did was I read up on my interviewers, what they did. For example, if that interviewer was a litigator, I, looked up a case online, Can Lee, and just asked them about a case, that they worked on. Or if it was someone who worked with corporate files, I looked up on their profile and see what corporate work they did, and just made a question about that. So 17 minutes is pretty short. It just flies. Sometimes you don't even remember the conversation you're having. It just goes by so fast. So most of that, I think it's a way of them putting a face on the application. See if you can really speak confidently, if you can really answer your questions sharply, concisely, and just the overall outlook of a candidate. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah, totally. So you should feel the room and see how they want you to reply. Some firms want you to be more confident, some firms want you to be more relaxed and more honest. So I feel like you should just feel the room. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that for your elevator pitch, so when they ask you, tell us a bit about yourself. And you have prepared this with so many people. What would you recommend to someone who is preparing for their OCIs now? Yes, you mentioned that it should be concise and that it should allow for room for questions, but at the same time, did you use any buzzwords, anything that made you like top of your class, went to the best university? Or what do you think that you included in those 2 or 3 minutes that made them more interested in you and said yes instead of a no?
That's a good question. And honestly, I probably have to think about it. So my approach was to not make it very methodical. You know, my approach was to narrate my experience, make it story-like, and I think that worked for me because people, you know, tend to relate more with stories. Um, so I just made up a story that sounded really good, um, and I wrapped it under 1 minute. Um, I didn't just tell them I did this, I did that, I did that. Well, I sort of made it more personal. I told them why I did this, why I did that, and this is what led me to this. So in a sense, it was more narrative in that way. I think another thing that I did was, as far as buzzwords are concerned, is yeah, I did use some of the things that I thought maybe could impress them. For example, um, back in back in law school, I had the opportunity to learn from three retired Supreme Court justices. So that is something I also just dropped. Just tell them that I had a good experience, that I went to a good place, because of course they wouldn't know, the school in Pakistan. They probably never heard about it. So I just had to, prop that up as well. But yeah, I forgot to mention something that is also something that comes up in the OCIs. It's on your resume. It's a little section called hobbies or interests, and that is where they usually start the interview from. It acts as an icebreaker. Um, I think it is a great way to set the tone for the rest of the interview. If you can make somehow like that conversation light and funny, the interview, I think, most of the time goes well. Um, I remember that day I was late I was almost late for my first OCI interview because the TDC, it just, I think, broke down in the middle. It just took me twice the time that I was supposed to take to reach there. So I opened up in every interview. I opened up with the same joke. I really like. Someone told me that TDC means take the car, and I really felt that today. So something of that sort to make the conversation light. And in one of my interviews, I remember we talked for like 10 minutes on Call of Duty because that was one of my interests in, on the resume. So just make it story-like, make it a narrative, and most people will relate to it. You will also be able to put in jokes and, make the conversation light. After all, it's only 17 minutes. You must make sure that they have a good time talking to you.
That's a great approach. And I wanted to go back to what you said about speak to your why you are doing this, why your path explains your passion or your desire. A lot of students use the word passion in their application package, and they fail to convey the why. Like they list the number of things, like where they went to school and where they worked, but no one understands the why behind it. So I feel like your cover letter and your application package should speak to your values, and that all the things that you're mentioning are incidental to those values, to just to prove your values. And it's the things
100%.
that you're doing in your elevator pitch. Like speak to why you're doing this, and they will remember you.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
have persuaded them better than if you just said, I was top of my class and I just worked there and I'm amazing.